On a crisp autumn afternoon in 1944, a young woman climbed into the cockpit of a shiny new fighter aircraft at what is now Los Angeles International Airport. She was not a combat pilot. She would never fly over the skies of Europe or lead a squadron into battle, but on that day she carried with her the hopes and fears of a nation at war. Her name was Gertrude Vreeland Tommy Tompkins Silver. On October 26, 1944, she disappeared without a trace. Gertrude was born on October 16, 1911, in Jersey City, New Jersey, the daughter of Vreeland and Laura Tompkins. She grew up in a world that did not expect much from a young woman who was shy, quiet, and burdened with a severe stutter. School was not easy for her, and classmates teased her mercilessly. She often kept to herself, wandering the streets and observing the world in silence. Books became her refuge. Tales of adventure, exploration, and courage spoke to her in a way nothing else could. But it was not until she was an adult that the skies would truly capture her imagination. One night, at a dance in New York, she met a young pilot named Mike Kolendorski, an American volunteer flying for the Royal Air Force. It was a fleeting encounter, brief yet electric. He spoke of the thrill of flight, the freedom of the sky, the ability to see the world from above. It was a revelation to Gertrude, who had always felt confined by the expectations of society. That night, she decided she would not be constrained. She would learn to fly. She would claim the sky as her own. Tragedy followed soon after. Mike was shot down in action over Europe, and the young woman who had once been timid and hesitant was now determined to take up his mantle. The memory of flight, and the freedom it gave her, stayed with Gertrude. Determined to be part of the war effort, she applied to a then-new program that was opening the skies to women, the Women Airforce Service Pilots, better known as the WASPs. Being accepted into the WASP was no small feat. Over 25,000 women applied, but fewer than 2,000 were accepted, and only about 1,000 completed the grueling training. These women were colloquially known as the Fly Girls, civilian pilots who flew military aircraft to free male pilots for frontline combat. The program was demanding, physically and mentally, pushing each woman to her limits. Every day was a test: navigation exercises over unfamiliar terrain, formation flying, night operations, and emergency procedures that could mean the difference between life and death. Failure was not tolerated. The men in the military relied on them to prepare aircraft, ferry fighters, tow targets, and deliver planes to bases across the country. Gertrude trained at Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas, where for 24 weeks she endured one of the toughest flight training programs of the war. She learned to master basic trainers, navigation, aerobatics, and advanced aircraft handling. She showed remarkable talent, a steady hand, and an instinctive feel for the controls that impressed instructors. A woman who had once struggled with confidence now moved through the sky with grace and assurance. By late 1944, she had logged more than 750 hours of flying time, including dozens of hours in fighter aircraft like the P-51 Mustang, one of the fastest and most powerful planes of the era. In September 1944, just a few weeks before her disappearance, Gertrude married Henry M. Silver, an Army technical sergeant and longtime friend. The marriage was quiet. WASPs were actually discouraged from marrying while on active duty, so she kept her name on official files as Gertrude Tompkins. Friends later spoke of her passion for flying and the quiet joy it gave her. Once timid and self-conscious, she now walked with purpose and skill, radiating confidence to those around her. She had found her calling. But destiny, ever unpredictable, was about to take her on one final, mysterious flight. On the afternoon of October 26, 1944, Gertrude and two other WASP pilots were assigned to ferry North American P-51D Mustang fighters from Mines Field in Los Angeles toward the East Coast. These Mustangs were brand new, destined for shipment to Allied forces after reaching the East Coast. The flight plan was simple: hop from base to base across the country, with the first stop at Palm Springs. Once there, the pilots would rest and continue their journey the next day. From the moment she reached the flight line, something seemed slightly off. A minor mechanical problem delayed her departure. A bent cockpit hatch had to be repaired before she could take off. It was only a few minutes delay, but in those minutes, the air seemed heavier, the clouds slightly darker, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Gertrude calmly inspected her Mustang, ran through her pre-flight checks, and finally climbed into the cockpit. She whispered to herself, as she often did before flights, "Just another day." Then she started the engine, taxiing into position as the propellers roared to life. At 3:42 p.m., Gertrude lifted off into the hazy California sky. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the city, the mountains, and the desert beyond. She climbed steadily, banking gently to follow the flight corridor. But somewhere between Los Angeles and Palm Springs, amid coastal haze and shifting winds, her Mustang vanished. At first, the other pilots assumed she would catch up. She had always been a strong flyer, capable of handling the plane in any situation. But as minutes stretched into hours, concern grew. Miscommunication and the lack of immediate reporting delayed the recognition that she was missing. By the time officials realized something was wrong, 4 days had passed. Search efforts were launched immediately. Army Air Forces, Coast Guard, and Civil Air Patrol units scoured the skies, deserts, mountains, and coastline. Planes flew grid patterns over the rugged terrain, search boats combed the waters, and teams combed every canyon and valley that might conceal her or the Mustang. But there was nothing. No wreckage. No floating debris. No signal. No body. Not even a hint of the aircraft she had been flying. Over the years, investigators and aviation historians have sifted through every known bit of evidence. Some theorize that Gertrude encountered dense fog or haze, becoming disoriented and unintentionally flying into Santa Monica Bay. The bay, with its murky waters and shifting currents, could easily have hidden a fatal crash. Sonar scans decades later found intriguing targets buried beneath sand, but none could be conclusively tied to her aircraft. Others suggest that the rugged terrain between Los Angeles and Palm Springs, mountains, canyons, and remote desert, might conceal wreckage beneath rubble, rocks, and brush. Teams have searched peaks and valleys with no success. Some speculate that procedural confusion, misreported flight plans, and the chaos of wartime record-keeping may have helped obscure what happened. But no official cause was ever determined. In November 1944, military officials classified Gertrude Tompkins Silver as missing and presumed dead. Her husband, Henry, mourned her loss for the rest of his life. Friends and fellow WASP pilots never stopped wondering what had happened, and her story became a quiet legend among aviation circles. Though nearly 80 years have passed, her case remains one of World War II's most haunting mysteries. A woman who trained as a pilot, earned her wings, and took to the skies, only to disappear into them forever. Gertrude was the only WASP pilot ever to vanish without a trace during the war. Among nearly 1,000 women who served in the remarkable program, she is singular in her fate. The absence of her aircraft, her body, and any record of her final moments left behind an enduring mystery. Her story is one of bravery, skill, and the ever-present uncertainty of life in the skies during wartime. In 2010, decades after the WASP program was disbanded and their contributions largely forgotten, Congress awarded them the Congressional Gold Medal. The recognition finally acknowledged the courage, skill, and sacrifice of women like Gertrude Tompkins Silver, who flew the skies with bravery and resolve, yet were often overlooked by history. To this day, no certified wreckage has been found, and no definitive explanation has been proven. Was it a tragic accident amid fog and confusion? A sudden mechanical failure? Or something else that the records never captured? We may never know. But Gertrude's legacy lives on, in the history of flight, in the bravery of women who dared to defy expectations, and in the unanswered question of what happened to the pilot who simply vanished into the sky. Her story reminds us of the fragility and courage of those who take to the air, and of the mysteries that the skies will sometimes hold forever.